Hello, Brian.
Hello, Josie.
Thank you. Thank you for wanting to be part of my podcast. So you've written a massive book. I've only read the excerpt you
The,
sent
well,
me.
well, I put out a sample there, yeah.
That's
So,
the
and
sample.
quote unquote sample because it's still 600 or 60,000 words. It's
Yeah, it was
roughly
a lot.
around 300 standardized pages. Yeah, the full book's around 1,000. I've written some other books, on diet nutrition as well. But yeah, I've got a long history there. And you say with a story, my goodness, like the number of stories that I have to share around this topic and just life. I mean, it's got a few to share.
Cool. So obviously yes, I've read the sample. I'm not gonna lie, there's some bits I skipped because I didn't necessarily know what it was as well. So I was it's I'm not, like I'm gonna interview this lovely person, so I don't need to research everything I don't understand either. So my first question would be to just briefly describe yourself, tell me who you are, and also briefly describe your relationship with fasting.
Yeah, so that's really, really complicated because there's a lot of stories around it. But I guess in the best sense, just at a very high level, um, I've been doing various forms of prolonged fasting and fasting for about 23 years now. I started before prolonged fasting was starting to catch on, before people even really knew what intermittent fasting was. Like if you look at the fasting subreddits itself, I'm trying to remember. I think it's like 11 years old or something like that. So, when I was doing it, there wasn't a lot of material or the community support. And like one of the difficult things with it too is there's a lot of different diet and nutrition forums where you can't talk about fasting. They won't allow it. There's a lot of stigmas around it, such that there's a stigma that it creates eating disorders, and there's also a very unscientific stigma that eating less than 1,200 calories a day leads to some term of current and long-term health issues, which is
Right.
completely unfounded. We can get into that, but so I guess to start it off, where kind of my real research came from outside of my practical experience, uh, I decided that I wanted to write a bit about some of my thoughts on diet and nutrition because, as most people know, diet and nutrition, there's a lot of conflicting evidence. People don't really know, they don't have definitive answers. And so I wanted to write about some of my thoughts and actually started like really reading clinical studies, like in terms of my main focal point, because for any scientific research, that's really where you want to go. You want to go into the peer reviewed scientific information. And of course, in diet nutrition sciences, that's going to be clinical studies. So I started researching it, and the more that I read, I realized like just how poor the actual science was. I read studies itself, like some studies they just say, oh, well, our hypothesis didn't match, so this is all wrong, kind of a thing, or like they say, well, we couldn't do this outside of saying, admitting that their hypothesis was wrong or digging further into the science. It's kind of like, well, we'll try again later, kind of a deal. I saw one
Right.
study on BMR formulas where it basically said, well, our numbers didn't match at first, so we started adjusting the formula until it did, and so that's why we know we're right. I'm like, wait a second, like,
That's
and
like
that's in
counterproductive for the
it.
scientific purpose, right?
Exactly, exactly. But I mean, but look, in all fields of science, like nowadays, everybody, like, there's a stigma against being wrong. I mean, it's one of the funny things about why I love the name of your podcast, Everybody's Wrong.
Yeah, we're getting
Um,
into very ethical and philosophical topics here.
oh yeah, and there are like, but in in nutrition sciences in particular, it's like the science is really weird because they don't really repeat studies. There's no consistency, repeatability. Normally in a study, if someone has some sort of profound conclusion, then someone across the globe or in a different lab or university or whatever will run the study themselves to verify the results. And this just doesn't
Mhm.
happen in diet and science for a lot of reasons. But
Okay.
the crazy thing was, I started finding out that there's a lot more research and clear data than is discussed mainstream, right? So when we say
Okay.
everybody's wrong, there's actually a lot of good information out there. But yes, everybody's wrong in the sense that no one talks about it, it's not discussed, even though you've got these really high
Mhm.
level studies and clinical scientists that have a lot of expertise and experience, doing their particular studies in the diet and nutrition realm, but they're not really talked about because when you take even the experts like this, I'm going to pick on this guy a minute because there's some good examples. Dr. Ben Bickham.
Okay.
So he is by all means he's a doctor. He is by all means an expert in metabolism. He actually is also like as an influencer. It's also rare that he is actually involved in a good amount of clinical studies. So he's got the knowledge, the experience. He is definitely someone you'd want to talk to. But once you start becoming an influencer, you start worrying about mass appeal and you oversimplify things. And it could be, you know, clickbait and views and more profit motives, don't know. But it also could be because you just don't believe the public's going to buy into it or that, you know, they're not going to do it even if you mention it, right? And one of the things that he said recently, you know, is, oh, well, if you want to improve your metabolism, one of the best things to do is just don't put syrup on your pancakes in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
And the crazy thing about that is they've done a lot of studies on moderation, and moderation fails and it doesn't produce any long term results. And not only that, I mean, granted, that's a really simple thing, but there are a lot of other, like one in particular, caloric restriction, what's called a very low energy diet, is the best thing that you can do for yourself, like long term, and tons of clinical studies on its efficacy and safety. Pretty much anyone can do it. So there are a lot of conditions like with prolonged fasting, um, where you might have, like if you're taking certain medications or you have certain health conditions, it might not be the best option for you, like even if you can do it in a limited sense. But everybody should know, like VLEDs are specifically studied for its ability to quickly reverse, and I do say reverse, full remission of full-blown type 2 diabetes. And so the fact that it never came up in this interview, and they're all staged interviews too, like, you know, you've got the interviewer. No, we chatted a little bit before about the show and who I am and that kind of a thing, but we didn't like stage this, you know, this podcast.
Mm.
Uh, but you see a lot of those questions like, so tell me about this. Oh, I couldn't believe that. It's like you're no, everything's prepared, it's scripted, it's obvious. So like to see him in that, you know, as an expert, not talking about the depth of clinical evidence and truth that I know as an expert he knows, right?
Mm.
Um,
Uh,
it's
uh,
it's
uh, uh,
really saddening.
am I okay to cut you? Because like
Absolutely, do it all the
you're.
time. I'm quite
No, no,
verbose.
that's
Yeah,
okay.
you're good.
Uh,
You're good.
First of all, wow. I want to say there's a lot of information I wouldn't know. Like I'm no nutrition expert by any means. Now I think I'm your average person that is, I want to be healthy. So like
Yeah.
I go to the gym every week. I try and eat as healthy as possible. I splurge into some bad food, from time to time, but usually I try to have colorful plates and the basic stuff. So I
Hmm.
think it's
Yeah.
I think it's interesting for me to talk to you because you've clearly gone full, I don't know,
Full
you
bore.
researched exactly, you researched a lot on the topic. So I think it's just very interesting to chat with you for
Yeah.
this. Um, okay, so you said a lot. First of all, let's backtrack a bit, and could you also, as briefly as possible, explain a bit your childhood? So obviously I read your sample, so I know a bit. But if you could explain, yes, your childhood or how you grew up, and maybe the link into how you got interested into researching about nutrition.
Yeah. So, I'm gonna fast forward. I mean, I had a pretty standard suburban, you know, like childhood.
Good.
I mean, lots of crazy stories there. But yeah, I'm gonna skip to the chase. Again, the pertinence here. Yeah. Um, so again, 2011, I just started to write a book, and before that too, I was into health and fitness, you know, a bit prior. I joined the Air Force back in 2001 after September 11th, you know, and that's really what got me like dedicated to fitness. And of course, because fitness is a big part of being in the military. Uh, so I was a bit of a gym rat for a lot of periods like after that. And I mean, I was just one of those people that I read articles, I was doing the things like you said. So like for example, you talked about, oh, well, I try to eat healthy. But the question is, you can go, well, what is eating healthy?
I agree.
There's a massive amount of debate about what that means, what healthy foods are, and it goes back and forth a lot. Um, But yeah, I mean, I love challenges. I'm constantly thinking. I'm a deep thinker. So like in that background, I'm an engineer in the Air Force. I was a computer programmer. I was a computer programmer after I left. So I do consider myself like a bit of an engineer and a scientist. Even though, some people say, oh, you're not a scientist because you don't run clinical studies. Well, science is a mindset. It's mindset, it's practice, it's behaviors. I don't know. And before I continue, like that good, or do you really want to dig into my childhood?
No, it's not. I don't necessarily want to
Yeah.
dig into your childhood. It's more to understand how you came across being
Yeah.
interested in this topic. You know.
So going back to the root of it, I decided to write about some of my thoughts because I saw just in my personal health history, in the research that I've done. Now I say research; it was like most people. I was trying to read more blogs and articles and stuff like that from people I trusted and trusted sites, rather than reading clinical studies. So, yeah, what really like the big kind of turning point that really kind of set me off, in terms of the deep clinical research, was when I decided to kind of formalize some of my thoughts and write some of my thoughts down about different theories that I had to explain, not just obesity, but different kind of conflicting and unclear points that people talk about a lot in diet and fitness.
Hmm.
Um, I came across or I decided to do my own health experiments. I should say that's, I was
Okay.
writing and again, I saw the poor studies, and I'm like, you know what, this is all kind of junk. I'm going to start from scratch in the,
So you use
so
yourself as your own guinea pig.
yes. So
Okay.
I'm also an amateur competitive eater. So I really thought that with these experiments, I could push myself, to kind of test some things out. So yeah, I had planned on doing blood work, DEXA scans. I did BMR measurements. I was doing food logs every day, trying to be as consistent as possible. Like I wasn't even, putting on lotion or wearing deodorant because sometimes those things have vitamins in them, and you never know how it's going to impact the result. Not that
I
they
appreciate the
necessarily will,
commitment.
yeah. But a lot of people would say, "Oh, that's stupid. Like they're not going to impact it." But I saw how poor the science was, and I said, "You know what? I'm going to cut everything out just to make sure." And it's really hard to sell an n=1 experiment, a lot of times. So yeah, so I started off with single food sources, and I started off with potatoes because potatoes is something that the Irish primarily ate for like 300 years, and they were
Mhm.
fine. Other people like in the potato industry had actually done some like 30, 60-day experiments like this as well. So
Okay.
I'm like, okay, well that's a safe one. But I
Mhm.
wanted to test out all these different foods, so I did 6.75 pounds of potatoes a day for 4 weeks, and I did choose,
Only
yeah,
potatoes.
only potatoes.
So you were obviously drinking water, but you were not having
Yes.
anything else.
No coffee, no tea, no salt, no oils, no butter, no seasonings, no nothing. Just
Only
potatoes.
potatoes.
Only potatoes.
Okay.
Potatoes and water. Yeah.
All right.
And I also knew from my research that it can take a while for different things to affect your blood work and your
Mm,
health. So,
mm,
4 weeks is about the time that I've seen that it can have some more substantial impact. Like if you look at a food elimination diet, for example, they do recommend switching foods once every 30 days because there's a lot of byproducts from what we
mm.
eat and so on and so forth. And it takes some time for those to adjust and clear out potentially. So yeah, 6.75 pounds of potatoes a day, for 4 weeks, and then I did 3 dozen eggs a day for 4 weeks.
And
Or yeah,
only eggs again.
only
Right, got
eggs,
you.
eggs and water.
That's fine.
Then then I did 5.2 pounds of bananas a day. Now that's flesh, that's peeled. So I was, weighing everything on a food scale, when I was, making my food logs and eating my meal of the day. So 5.2 pounds of potatoes a day for 4 weeks. And then I had lost a lot of weight and I was kind of getting concerned, like if I was doing something to myself. Now in hindsight, I'd say no, it was just fine. It's
Mm,
temporary. But I
mm.
decided to kind of go completely opposite, and I did 4.5 pounds of raw beef a day for 4 weeks.
Okay.
And so yeah, so I published a few videos, on my amateur competitive eating, but also eating raw meat. Like back, now it's kind of caught on a bit, so you can find a whole bunch of raw meat videos. But back in the day, I was like a top 5 top 10 YouTube
Yeah,
search
no.
for
I
eating
looked
raw
at your
meat.
YouTube and we chatted about it, and you were like, "Yes, I'm the OG Liver King." I'm like, "Yes, I know
OG
you
Liver
are."
King.
That's the one. Sorry, my accent. But yeah, no, I was like, "Oh my God, this is insane." Anyway, fascinating. Please keep going.
Yeah. So, like the after I started looking at all the data, one of the things that really stood out was cholesterol,
Okay.
and my cholesterol was changing rapidly, but also very predictably, according to both saturated fat and dietary cholesterol. And so you'll find mixed evidence about how much diet really does impact serum cholesterol and whether or not it's like a lot of people will. Most people agree that it's saturated fat is a big part of that, but some
Mm.
people suggest that dietary cholesterol doesn't really affect your serum cholesterol too much, which is kind of silly because everything that you eat that gets digested and processed ends up going through your blood, right? That your blood is your body's transport system. So the notion that dietary cholesterol wouldn't impact your serum cholesterol is just, it's kind of silly.
Can we just pause here and can you just explain briefly what's cholesterol and why are you making this difference? Just to.
Well, of course, I mean, cholesterol is a lipid, that's in the blood. So it's
Hmm.
a lipid profile. There's various types of cholesterol. So you've got, mainly people are looking at LDL versus HDL. Most people consider HDL to be very good, LDL to be very
Okay.
bad. But
Okay.
most people use it as a major metric for health, and it all stems from Ansel Keys in 1953, I want to say, where he came up with the lipid hypothesis. And that's why so many people, as soon as they have high cholesterol, they're prescribed statins. It all comes from that
Okay.
one, from that one. We've never really proved the causality of high cholesterol, and there's a lot of debate about that. So, I mean, I could talk more about how it impacts health and everything like that, but like most people have had their cholesterol measured and they're kind of familiar with that. It's an important health metric,
Yeah, yeah.
right?
So, but because you were making a difference between two types, so I'm just wondering if overall cholesterol means bad, right?
Well, that's the thing. Cholesterol's
Okay.
demonized, it's simplified, and
Okay.
I mean, there's a lot of different research there, but to put it briefly, like I wasn't worried about that. I was really just looking at my total cholesterol. I was looking at some specific numbers, but the thing that really stood out was how quickly it moved because there aren't a lot of
Mm.
studies on cholesterol, like various biomarkers for health. Like, so for example, if you talk about fasting glucose and cholesterol, right,
Mm-hmm.
they're two really big numbers. And a lot of people think that these numbers and these health metrics are really long-term indications of health, and they're not. Like, they can quickly move, very quickly move. Like when I was doing eggs, for example, one of the things I wanted to see was, okay, um, I was pretty confident that eggs were going to raise my cholesterol, even though, again, it's like a lot of people say, oh, no, it won't, or it's insignificant. So I
Mm.
was doing my blood work for lipids every single week. And the very first week, my cholesterol went up 120 points. Very first week. So, um,
So
but
eggs equal cholesterol.
yes, of course. Oh man, we don't. That's one can of worms we don't really need to open up. But yeah, it's been a long debate. Like, do eggs contribute and some people say yes, some people say no. This research is mixed. But
Mm.
here, you know what? While we're talking about this is one good example about how unscientific the research on eggs are, right? So when they do a study to determine whether or not eggs impacts your cholesterol in a positive or negative way,
Mm-hmm.
they usually do studies where people are eating. They usually have to eat at least 6 eggs by themselves, right? So whether or not it's scrambled or over easy or an omelet, it's just 6 actual eggs a day. The problem is there's eggs in a lot of our other foods that we eat,
Mm-hmm.
and so they don't track that. They
Right.
never try to track that. They never
Interesting.
try to account for it. And when they get results, here's the thing: 6 eggs might seem like a lot. I was doing 3 dozen a day. Okay, like 6 eggs is not a whole lot if you really want to figure out. And like the thing that's really insane to me in terms of science is if you get these confusing results, again, why not prescribe someone 2, 3 dozen eggs a day, right? Why not do that? And there's no study like that, but they're like
Mhm.
some look as little as 3 eggs, some look at 6, and the thing is, okay, so let's take like a 3 egg a day study. Well, you're probably going to eat at least 3 eggs a day in the other foods that you're eating. Like, that's not too hard to do. And so you could have participants that were in the no egg group eating
Mm.
eggs in the other foods that they were eating, and that didn't count, and they didn't try to account for it at all. So
No, I
that's one of the
understand.
reasons why the science is so poor, is because it's so poorly controlled.
Mm,
Um,
interesting.
yeah, and so looking at cholesterol, like I started to focus on that like the next couple of years, and I felt really good eating bananas, right? So it's really easy, it's cheap too. So I decided to see if I could get a consistent and repeatable result for particularly cholesterol eating a 4-week banana diet, and I did. So my cholesterol on a banana diet is 142 milligrams per DL plus or minus 4. Like, that is an incredibly small error tolerance, or variation, considering that it's even well under what people would consider the laboratory error, right?
Mm,
And so there's also, day-to-day fluctuations people say that,
mm,
will occur. But I found it to be incredibly consistent, incredibly repeatable, and I knew that was in large part because I was controlling my diets and experiments so well.
mm,
Um, and that's why it's probably so ludicrous, or it seems ludicrous or impossible in the realm of diet sciences. Now, a lot of that too is because if you tried to get a group to participate in a study and you said, okay, you're going to eat 5.2 pounds of bananas a day, like, the adherence is probably going to be very, very, very low,
mhm,
even if you
mhm,
could get people to agree to it. But I found that it was incredibly repeatable. So I started looking at more numbers in terms of how quickly it moved, how it could change. And yeah, I did find that it really doesn't change in a day, but it can change pretty rapidly within a week, and that actually within 4 days. So here's the important thing to note too. It means that if you have some sort of off cholesterol test, right? You go to the doctor, you're doing, your checkup or whatever, and let's say you're kind of borderline, maybe, 210, right? Total cholesterol. A doctor could come up and just say, oh, well, your cholesterol's high, you need statins. Except here's the thing, digging into the research about it, number one, the recommendation if you have borderline or high cholesterol, and again, doctors don't do this, but this is what they're supposed to do. Why they don't do it, I don't know. The volatility of these cholesterol measurements and the error of cholesterol measurements is generally about, like, it's about 10%.
mm,
So at 200, that's 20 milligrams, right?
mm.
Right. So
So the margin is quite big, basically.
the margin's quite big. So if you're at 210 and your margin of error is around, is 21, it means you could actually be in a what's considered the reference range for a healthy cholesterol.
Hmm,
But they'll
hmm.
just say, "Oh, no, you need statins." And the
Right.
other thing in my research that was really, really sad, that really hit me hard, is that if you're dieting, right, when you mobilize fat, that fat goes into your blood, and that reflects as cholesterol if you were to do a blood test. So if you're losing weight, especially if you're losing significant weight, you're going to have elevated cholesterol most likely, and that's due to
Mhm.
fat mobilization. And where this really stands out, it's very well known in people like anorexics. They typically have very high cholesterol because
Oh.
their body's constantly circulating their fat. And so when I came to that point of research, it was my first week long water fast. So I had done fasting up to about 48 hours many times. Like, I eat
Mhm.
OMAD a lot too, which is about a 24-hour fasting period, right? Still considered IF, but eating once a day. But I had a lot of experience with shorter term fasting at that point. And I did a week, and my initial thought was, oh, well, I'm not putting anything into my body, right? So no vitamins or
Mm.
saturated fat or dietary cholesterol. So my body's going to run lower on cholesterol. But it jumped up. It jumped up significantly. I'm trying to remember, it was somewhere
Oh.
between, I want to say, 30 to 60 points. It jumped up. But I looked at him like, what the heck? And then I started doing research and found out it is very, very, very well known that if you're losing weight, if fat is being mobilized, then you're going to have elevated cholesterol. And the really sad part that hit me about it is, let's say you have someone who goes in and they do get a high cholesterol test, and they fortunately have a doctor that tries to encourage them to do diet and exercise and things like that to correct the issue.
Mm,
So they
mm,
go in, they start improving. They're like, oh my gosh, I'm feeling great. I'm doing really well. You go in, and then your cholesterol is actually even just a little bit higher. Oh, well, you were doing it wrong. You need to go on
right.
drugs. You can't do it. And doctors don't take into account, hey, were you just losing weight? What kind of diet are you doing? Because those things all can impact it, especially short term.
That's
And
crazy.
then, it's like, oh, yeah, when people are doing everything right, they're being told that they're still wrong. And now here's the thing about everybody's wrong, right? So the doctor's wrong,
Mm,
and a lot of people you know, would don't account for all these variables, but the truth is out there. Like, it's
mm.
very well clinically established. It's very well metabolically explained. It's just, for
So,
whatever reason, people don't care.
so from what I gather, so yeah, you go into it through studying cholesterol at first, which very interesting results. But really, you really have, because you clearly know more than me about this topic. So I have a feeling that you really believe there is a lack of no, there is not there is an abundance of data onto how things work, but there is a lack of how this data is actually handled and used, and it's mostly
100%.
because the people who would promote nutrition and diet and they're they work with sponsors or they're driven by profits, and so therefore is that something that you're believing from what I
I,
gather?
I, I do believe that's part of it. I do believe it's
Parts.
potentially
Okay.
very complicated. One of my favorite examples here, like, are you a strain? Well, what is it? Is it Stranger Things, right? Yeah, the
Yeah,
Netflix
I know the
show,
TV
right? Yeah,
show.
Stranger.
I know the TV
Okay,
show.
so here's the funny thing about this. This is an example I love to use. At the end of the first season, when they're going to blow the lid off of everything, right? So they're talking to the reporter or whatever, and he's like, "Oh
Yes.
no, no one's going to believe the truth," right?
Mm,
And so they come up with this government conspiracy explosion theory or whatever it was to explain what happened. Because if they actually told the truth, they thought, "Oh, well, no one's going to believe this. They're going to think you're crazy." And so
mm,
that's one of the reasons why I think could motivate some of the experts and people who are influencers that actually do know the truth from not saying anything. It could be, again, it could be mass appeal too. It could be like more profit motivated. Oh, well, if I tell people that there really is a solution, but it actually takes effort. There's no magic. There's no silver bullet, and it takes a hell of a lot more than just not eating syrup with your pancakes in the morning to make health changes. That's what it takes, but you can do it, and anyone can do it, because it's a lot easier when you have issues to just like, oh, well, no one really knows the answer. It must just be my body, and that's a lot more
yeah.
comfortable for people to believe at times.
I no, I get it. I agree, and I think it's something that's encompassing from not just nutrition but everything.
Yeah.
Let me because thank you.
Oh, yeah.
I've written some questions for you. Dut, dut, dut. So you kind of yeah, you explain how you got into this whole world of the nutrition and diets and all that. But and so you've during that time you also had practice of doing fasting,
Hmm.
but you have much more of an interesting fasting lifestyle after, right? Like, so can you go
Yeah.
through this? From what I understand, you went through a period of your life where you kind of let yourself go,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then you decided to do a long. Well, so you said long rolling fasts.
Hmm.
So if you could explain what that is, how that came about, that'd be interesting.
Yeah, so when I was really researching and kind of starting to really get into the clinical science of fasting, it's like I was healthy, I was a gym rat, like everything's going well in life, right? Um, so I've never really had like a shredded six pack or anything like that, but I had visible abs, I had some good numbers in the gym, so everything was going well. Had a bad divorce, like, life kind of hit. Yeah, I started drinking very heavily, and I went from slowly crept up from about 165 pounds to 175, 180, 190, and I
Mm.
ended up getting to about like 230 pounds. And the interesting thing was, I was still fasting at that time.
Okay.
It probably mitigated a lot. Like I still, I would fast probably at least, I want to say 1 or 2 days at least every month. you
Okay.
know so it might have mitigated that like a whole lot, but after I really decided enough was enough, I had a couple attempts prior where I got down to 200 pounds, but then I went right back up.
Mm.
But when I decided enough was enough, um, I took all the knowledge and experience that I had about fasting, and yeah, the quickest way to see results, particularly for weight loss, is between 5 to 7 day what they call rolling fast. And so a rolling
Okay.
fast is a way where and again, a lot of misconceptions about the term and what it means, but it's meant to basically fast for as long as is beneficial in the moment. Now, I do recommend people fast at least 72 hours, and
Mm-hmm.
um, may, you know, I recommend capping it at 7 days. That's a whole
Mm-hmm.
nother slew of reasons that we can get into later. But I recommend capping it at 7 days for both physiological results as well as mitigating risks and safety and things like that. So I was doing like 5 to 7 day rolling fast. I lost 50 pounds in the first 2 months.
In two
I've
months.
in 2 months.
That's quite
In two
good.
months, yeah. Um, I wasn't going to the gym. I wasn't doing cardio or anything like that. Just very aggressive fasting. And
Hmm.
so, yeah, I estimate that it's 50 pounds, but I estimate I fasted about 50 days out of the 60 total.
Right.
Might be, it wasn't exact. I wasn't counting it, at that time, but it was the vast majority of those 2 months I was actually fasting. So I dropped the 50 pounds. I took a break, and then you got like weight maintenance and adaptation breaks, and that's a whole nother thing about like epigenetics and conditioning to get into. And then like after that, I would during weight maintenance breaks, I was still fasting maybe usually 1 to 3 days a week, more like playing
Okay.
an ear, giving my body a rest, eating a little bit more, trying to kind of adapt to that lower weight and reload nutritionally. So it took the next chunks of weight took a long time past that. That was like 2 years ago, and it took me, I had several periods of like, multiple months of again weight maintenance and adaptation breaks, but again, still currently, I usually fast at least 1 to 2 days a week.
Okay. Right now, you mean?
Yeah, still currently.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Yeah. So I have been eating, and you can actually gain weight while fasting. It's all about how you refeed. Um,
Oh. Oh. Of
yeah.
course. Okay.
I mean, look, if you're fasting for 1 or 2 days a week, it's really easy to make up those calories and to even eat
Well, that's
more.
true. If you
Yeah.
splurge into McDonald's and cakes afterwards, it's not going to do anything, is it?
Well, no, it's not, and that's it's nice to believe that, and you get that a lot on the Reddit too. It's like, hey, if I fast, 1 or 2 days
Mm.
a week, how much is that going to help my health? And it's like, who
Mm.
knows, right? It depends on how you're eating
Well,
afterwards, right? Yeah,
so I've got questions off the back of that. So let's take my example. I'm fairly young, in my 20s, and I'm
you
fairly.
calling me old?
No,
No,
I'm just. It's my example. I'm
it's
taking
okay.
my
I'm old.
example.
Yeah, you're good. You're good.
I'm fairly skinny and healthy, nothing to blah, blah. And I've done fasting before, but I always failed at the either 46th or 47th hour. I've always failed right before that 48th hour because I was just way too hungry, and I was getting as well, dizzy. And like if
Yeah.
I stood up, I had to go whoa, and I know I would walk very slowly, and I'd feel just very tired overall. So what would you recommend for, actually, to be fair, for either a man or a woman? But I have a feeling it's going to be different. So what would you recommend? No, is it no? Okay, what would you recommend for like refeeding and how to
Yeah.
apprehend all of this?
Okay, so number one, uh if you get lightheaded and dizzy within
Mm-hmm.
the first 24 to 72 hours of fasting, it's very likely that you have at least some degree of insulin resistance.
Okay.
That's usually what causes it. And when I was writing my last book, one of the things that I was doing some research on to see if there were actually numbers on how prevalent insulin resistance was. And it's really hard because most of the time it's undiagnosed, and
Mm-hmm.
the numbers aren't really exact. But from what I saw, the estimates were about 60% of the obese population has insulin resistance.
Oh boy.
So, yeah, so it's really prevalent. Now, in terms of um, people who are leaner, like
Yes.
what the prevalence is there, it's a little bit harder to say. I didn't see those numbers exactly. But I mean, the estimate is actually pretty high in terms of like, I mean, I would easily put it, even for someone who's healthy weight, at least 20%, if not up to 50%, have at least a slight degree of insulin resistance. And
Interesting.
yeah, so what happens is that lightheaded and dizziness, when you start fasting, like the problem with fasting with having insulin resistance is when you start fasting and you stop taking in glucose.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the excess insulin in your blood will clear that glucose faster than normal because it's left over, right? It's left over and it's still
Ah.
there. So what
Mm-hmm.
happens
Mm-hmm.
is your glucose will drop rapidly. When you're insulin sensitive, your blood glucose actually increases when you fast. And this is because your body starts releasing all of its stored glucose, right? It's in
Mm-hmm.
the
Mm-hmm.
form of,
Mm-hmm.
of glycogen. It's mostly stored in your muscle mass, but your liver contains a good portion too. So it'll actually bump up because your body stops producing insulin and starts pushing out glucose.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't, it stops producing insulin because it knows that it's being depleted, and if it produced insulin again, that's what causes fat storage and shuffling that off, right? But it knows that you're being deprived, and so it wants to do that. But with insulin resistance, it drops very rapidly, very quickly, and insulin also inhibits lipolysis and ketogenesis. So
Mm.
you're in this period where even though you have glucose available, you have fat available, it can't access either. So you get abnormally quick hypoglycemic symptoms. And so if
Oh.
you and so the quicker that it onsets when you're fasting, like there's people that get those symptoms and severe symptoms within 24 hours. And those are people that probably have pre-diabetes or full-blown type 2 diabetes, and they
Mm-hmm.
just, potentially don't know it. Um, so if you have insulin resistance, oh, let me say this though, going 48 hours is pretty good, right? There's a
Okay.
lot of people that can't do that. So
Well,
kudos on you. I'm not,
47,
yeah,
but thank you. I'll take
47.
it.
You're good. Yeah, good. I like the exactness.
Yes.
But fasting for that amount of time, it's really good, and you can make a lot of progress doing that. But if you're having severe difficulties, or you want to do something that maybe is more sustainable, right? Because if you're fasting, let's say 2 days a week, and every single time you got to cut it off because you got to start recognizing when you feel bad. And by the way,
Mhm.
those conditions, not only are they not fun, but they can also be dangerous. Your body can further drop glucose. You can get, you can faint and things like that. And of course, it won't usually directly kill you, but if
Mhm.
you faint from hypoglycemic symptoms and hit your head on something, or
Sure.
you're driving, things like that, like it can be fatal.
Mhm.
So, in the case of insulin resistance, I highly recommend going back to the very low energy diets, which are typically prescribed between about 500 to 800 calories a day. So, a
Mhm.
highly nutrient dense, very low energy diet is specifically studied for its ability to reverse insulin resistance, again, even full on type 2 diabetes. And most studies show that most participants, I think, usually but usually by about the 12-week mark or the 16-week mark. And it's hard to say exactly as a whole because different studies have different protocols and different periods. I mean, there's no consistency there, but it's generally accepted that there is a high likelihood to fully reverse even type 2 diabetes with a very low energy diet within 12 to 16 weeks. And even if you don't have full remission, you will have very significant improvements in your insulin resistance, improving your insulin sensitivity. So
Okay.
that's the thing I would say in your case. Okay, great. Hey, fasting 2 days is a great period, but if you want something that maybe is a little safer and consistent, maybe a very low energy diet is safer for you. Is
No,
better for you.
definitely. Okay, so basically, a low energy diet works against insulin resistance. Correct.
Yes.
Okay, and hopefully for a person like me that feels a bit dizzy and that, doing a low energy diet for a while, then after doing a proper water fast would be better. Less dizziness, less all of that.
Yes.
Okay.
It could lead to some better sustainability and some better long-term success. And like the thing that I want to point out here in comparison, so like just changing your diet, even if you adopt, like if you already have insulin resistance, it takes more work and effort to correct that, right? You can't
Mm-hmm.
just do the little things. Moderation doesn't work. Moderate approaches like simply cleaning up your diet and or combined with like intermittent fasting like is very popular for people to do like 16/8, which is really funny because like when you're doing like a 16/8 implementation of intermittent fasting, I it's you're skipping a meal, and that's had a lot of controversy around like how healthy that is for you long term or not. But you do really have to go at least to the 24-hour period to have a significant drop in your insulin levels. And so, if you're using IF and moderate approaches, it usually takes 6 months to years to never to reverse your insulin resistance. It just might not be enough, right? But if you're fasting 48 hours, you got a good shot, or doing that very low energy diet where you consistently have low insulin responses, then it leads to very rapid results. So, and this is the issue. Remember how I said that you can't talk about eating less than 1,200 calories a day in most diet nutrition forums?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, one of the most effective, clinically studied, proven methods to reverse insulin resistance, which a large portion of the population has, which is very beneficial to fix first before you try to do other health goals,
Mm-hmm.
you can't talk about it.
So, as in the low energy diet,
Yeah.
right? Could you explain briefly how do you define low energy diet?
It's usually clinically implemented as a 500 to 800 calorie a day allowance,
All right.
and there's no strict definition on what it is. There are some studies that will use meal replacements, and again, this is one of those things. Most meal replacements are not whole foods. A lot of them have synthetic vitamins and nutrients added, which are very well clinically established not to absorb properly. You're much better off eating 500 to 800 calories of whole foods, and especially too if you're losing weight. Yes, plant-based foods are great for that. They're good for that. I mean, it's not to say that you can't implement a good keto style or carnivore diet even on that, but it's usually easier to get all the nutrients that you need eating the foods that are highest in that. Like, for example, some people advocate broccoli for its calcium, but my God, you have to eat pounds of broccoli to get the same, calcium as in one glass of milk, right? And people aren't going to eat pounds of broccoli a day. So it's like, look, you know, dairy is also demonized by some people, but it's like, look, if you need calcium, just drink some milk,
Just
okay?
drink some milk.
Just drink some milk. You're good. Don't worry about it. Um, so
Right.
if
So,
people
can
are
I just
doing
interject again?
all the
Sorry.
time,
Okay, good. So I get it. Low energy diet, 500 to 800 calorie. So, but what would you say are good, clever ingredients then to have? Because you said if you need calcium, drink a glass of milk. Don't eat thousands of broccoli, which I get. But what ingredients would you just recommend to have in this sort of diet?
so yeah, there's a lot of debate in terms of what nutrient density really means. There's different
Mm-hmm.
ways to define it, and without getting into that right now, just like the very high level way to explain it, it's called eat the rainbow. Right. So eat the rainbow is this mindset where it's like, look, eat the different colors of food. So, um, you know, if you haven't had anything orange for a while, right? It's like, well, eat an orange. If you haven't had anything green for a while, have some broccoli, eat your mushrooms. But basically the concept is just, you know, eat a wide variety of healthy nutrient dense foods. Basically, nothing processed. As long as you're whole food based, you really can't go wrong, right? So eat the rainbow, like eat a mixture of foods. So I'll do that as well. Like if I haven't had mushrooms in a while, let's say it's been a month since I had a good portion of mushrooms. I'm like, you know what? I haven't had mushrooms in a while. I'm going to eat some mushrooms. And there's no real scientific evidence that definitively says you need to eat mushrooms once a month or anything like that. Oh yeah, you know what? And I want to go to the proteins here too. So it also means like, look, if you haven't had organ meat for a while, eat some organ meat, right? Beef liver is
Mm,
arguably one of the most nutritious things that you can eat.
mm,
But if you haven't had fish for a while, right? It's like fish is a very good source of protein, especially if you're eating like tuna or salmon, black cod, or which are fatty fishes. They tend to have very good fatty acid profiles, especially with omega threes. So, eat some fish if you haven't some for a while. But yeah, eat the rainbow.
okay.
Just make sure to eat a large diversity of foods to try to get a wide range of nutrients.
Okay, no, that's. I think that's a very good and quick advice.
Yeah.
Without getting into all of the details of the vitamins and what it does. Just eat the rain.
Yeah.
No, I
It's
like it.
no, 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 no. I hear you. It's funny because everybody like when I say shorter things like that, like hopefully I can be short from time to time. Yes, I tend to be very verbose, detail
And that's
oriented.
great. That's
And
what we
some people are
love.
like, wow, thank you for that thorough explanation. And it's like, my thorough explanation is like 100 pages, but cool, thanks. Appreciate you.
Okay, no, fascinating. Okay, so I'm learning about a lot insulin resistance and what are all those different diets. Um, Let me see what I've written for you here. Du-du-du-du-du-du. So, could you maybe go through what happens when a human fasts inside the body and why it's a good thing? And maybe I know we can
Oh
find on the
man.
internet, but it's just because, for instance, I'm thinking, do people with insulin resistance do they also get the full, do they go into what is it, autophagy and ketosis and all that? Like, does it
Yeah.
impact the same people the same way? Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
I mean, autophagy is a big topic. Yeah. So autophagy is one of the primary, well, the main physiological reasons people fast is, for improving insulin resistance. And on the other side of the spectrum too, people could do it to improve insulin sensitivity. So that's one of the weird nuances here with the word. They're not exactly the same. So you can have normal insulin function, so you're not insulin resistant, but you might not be what would be defined as insulin sensitive.
Mm,
So the more insulin sensitive you are, the more powerful the hormone is, the less that you need, and the better your metabolic health. So
mm,
you can, like, even without a problem with your insulin levels, you can fast to further improve your insulin sensitivity.
mm.
And everybody gets those benefits, right? And it does typically take about 16 to 24 hours for a lot of benefits to kick in.
Okay.
And that includes insulin, improving insulin, like, well, I should say reducing insulin levels, as well as autophagy. So that's really too why some people will argue that, oh well, you get results doing a 16/8, but that's just when they start, right?
Mm,
So you got to really hit that full 24 hours to get more benefits, and then things kind of change in there. But there's a whole host of metabolic responses. Um, yeah, so autophagy is something where it's never really completely off, but it'll ramp up between 16 to 24 hours. It peaks around 3 days, and it will start to taper after five, because autophagy is actually a caloric intensive process. So after 5 days, and there's some other reasons too, like it cleans up the low hanging fruit. Like, and if you think about it like cleaning a house, right?
mm,
It's
mm,
easy
mm.
to get the small stuff. It's a lot harder to do your spring cleaning and clear everything out and, like, take a toothbrush to the corners and things like that.
That-
So
Great metaphor.
thanks. So after 5 days, when your body starts kicking up its energy conservation, that happens, right? And so that happens due to, like, BMR downregulation versus via the hormone leptin. Yeah, so your body will start to conserve energy when you're fasting. I mean, it's just the natural kind of state of it. Um, and that's via the hormone leptin. And one of the interesting things is this is often demonized as starvation mode or metabolic damage.
Mm,
And part of the reason for why those myths are still so pervasive, on top of everything that we discussed, like how hard it is to get the truth out there, leptin wasn't discovered until 1994. And one of the most respected clinical scientists, in my opinion, is a man named Dr. Rudolf Leibel,
okay.
and he is arguably, well, he was a co-discoverer of leptin, and he's arguably one of the world's foremost experts on the biochemistry and metabolism of obesity. Um, so yeah, so I will I respect his work, and his clinical studies are really high quality. Um, and it's been very well established that any quote unquote damage from fasting or caloric deprivation, it's only a short term response to your body wanting to be safe, because your
Hmm.
body thinks where you're at, healthy or not, is where you want to be. That's the safe space. And
Hmm.
so it fights change. Like, that's the big importance. It's not that what you're doing is unhealthy or there's permanent damage. It's slow to change, to make those big changes. So leptin goes down, but I mean, there's there's very well documented effects for cortisol, adrenaline. Oh yeah, another fun thing here. And so anyway, but you had asked like what happens to your body? Like, oh my goodness, like this is another one of those things where there's a good 50 to 100 pages at least.
Okay.
Your
Okay.
human
But,
growth hormone kicks up to help you preserve muscle mass, and it increases to about 5 times within the first 24 hours or so, 24 to 72 hours, and so that helps you preserve muscle mass while you're fasting. But
okay.
yeah, I mean, I
So
could talk about
too
specifics.
much. There's too much things going on.
Yeah, oh, exactly. And in my brain, I've got like 1,000 pages circling in my head. It's like, oh no, that's not a good question for an impromptu, for me impromptu. Can't.
So okay, so in that case, let's look at it the other way. When do you think it's time to stop? Because you said
Okay.
you
Yeah.
recommend from 5 to 7 days. So why stop at 7 days? Is it because it gets too dangerous, or do the effects kind of like stop anyway?
So the physiological results will diminish, right? So basically, it's a return on or it's a diminishing returns, right?
Hmm.
So that's number one. In terms of muscle preservation, right? So you can do a week-long fast with zero muscle loss, right? It's not that hard to mitigate muscle loss. And but when your body gets to critically low levels of glucose, right, it
Mm,
needs at least some glucose to survive. That's why if you're fasting for, let's say, 30 days, right,
mm,
your body's glucose doesn't just go to zero. If it went to zero, you'd be dead.
right,
um,
got you.
but where does your body get its glucose from when you're depleted, when you're completely empty, have no dietary intake? It's from muscular catabolism, because there's a process called gluconeogenesis that can convert amino acids into glucose. So after 7 days, your risks of muscular catabolism increase. It gets harder to manage electrolytes the longer you go on, and so like electrolytes are another hot topic, because if you're fasting less than 7 days, the clinical science is really clear that water only fasting is definitely safe at 7 days or less. There's
Mm,
some studies and mixture of opinions on how quickly imbalances like hypo imbalances can come after that. But there's been people that have done true water fasts for 30 days.
mm,
But it does increase risk. And so just because of how touchy that subject is, that's another good reason to say, you know what, I'm very safe saying, yes, the clinical evidence suggests that you don't need to supplement electrolytes, less, 7 days or less, but do take them if you feel better. So that's one of the things. Again, electrolytes can get harder to balance, and especially if you don't want to take them for whatever reason, that's a really safe point to say, you know what, I got enough from this fast, time to refeed a little bit. But there's other risks like nutritional deficiencies, and one of the really clear things in the science and the clinical evidence is how important nutrition is to our health and metabolic function. In fact, there are a lot of theories that obesity, like one of the main drivers of obesity, is malnutrition, and there's a lot of
mhm, mhm,
evidence for
mhm,
that.
mhm, mhm,
So the thing is, and fat mobilization requires a lot of nutrients for energy metabolism. So after 7 days, even though you might not have a deficiency, let alone a severe deficiency, your nutrient levels start to reduce, and so that can lead to some suboptimal metabolic functions, including fat mobilization. So at 7 days, like so, if you're getting a good amount of nutrients every 7 days, you're ensuring that you can ensure that you preserve lean muscle mass. You won't have electrolyte issues. Um, the risk go down, and you avoid nutritional deficiencies. It can cause a whole host of other problems. In terms of the stopping point, there are some really clear indications. Like, I mean, I've got a whole list like in the book, and that's in the sample as well. Like, I believe, um, but things in general, like the best way to say it, like if you feel off, if you hurt, right?
Sure.
Stop
It's time
fasting.
to stop.
Lighthead. It's normal. Like so let's go lightheadedness and dizziness, right?
Mm,
Because anyone fasting can have some small bouts of that,
mm,
of those symptoms, like including myself. But for me, it's almost exclusively just when I'm standing up. Like if I stand up too quickly, right,
yeah.
and I'm 7 days
Right.
fasted, I'm gonna get a little lightheaded for a minute and be like, woo! But here's the thing, you know, how bad is it? Were you close to fainting? Is it persistent? How long does it last? And those are all cues. So if you have any symptoms, even mild symptoms that are just, a little off, but they're persistent, they don't get any better or they're worsening, time to stop fasting.
Okay,
There's some
that's
really
good.
big ones, yeah, like severe nausea,
Mm,
vomiting,
mm, mm, mm. That makes sense. That
severe
makes sense.
cramping, yeah, all that stuff. Stop fasting, be safe. Health is a marathon, not a sprint. It's a big kind of mantra for health goals. It requires long-term lifestyle changes. So if you cut one fast short for safety to include, but not risking your life, right? Like that's the call. That's what you do. Fast another day, and that's why rolling fasting is so cool
Mm,
because you just stop. Like, let's say you have an off week and for whatever reason you don't feel good. Like, I mean, it could be a cold or flu even,
mm,
right?
mm, mm.
Just stop, refeed a little bit, and when you feel better, start again, right?
Oh, that's fair.
Because you can fast a large portion of many months in a row and you're not going to lose out in the grand scheme of things. So, yeah, always play it safe.
And so, how about when you're refeeding? Whether you're just doing a fast of, say, I don't know, 72 hours once in a month, or you're
Mhm.
doing a rolling fast. How would you go about refeeding during those periods when you do? What food
Yeah.
do you recommend to get?
So first off, the main thing to discuss, and this comes up a lot in fasting forums, is refeeding syndrome, and it's
Okay.
not really a thing, right? So refeeding syndrome is actually a very serious condition, but again, if you're fasting less than 7 days, you do not need to worry about it, right? If you
Okay.
started off nutritionally loaded and healthy, fasting 7 days is not going to put you in a state where you need to worry about refeeding syndrome.
Okay.
But it is really serious, and you do have to take that seriously, especially if you're fasting for 30 days or more.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, as a whole, don't worry about refeeding syndrome. And it's all about eating healthy, nutritious foods. It doesn't matter. The less
Okay.
experience that you have, take it slower, take it gradual. Oh, did you, I know you were in the fasting subreddit a little bit. Did you ever see the phrase never trust a fart?
Never trust a fart.
Never trust a fart. No,
No, I
never
have
trust a
not seen
fart.
this face. The phrase. No.
So, So one of the things that happens is you can have some sudden and irregular bowel movements both when you're fasting and when you're
Okay.
refeeding. So there's
Okay.
there's a lot of there are a lot of funny stories to this, and I do write about this in the book. It's one of the things. Yeah, if you have a fasting book and they don't say never trust a fart or talk in depth about the changes that are going to happen with your bowel movements, it's not a real fasting book, right? Um, but there are okay, so what happens is, especially too, like as your body is processing fat while you're fasted, right? There's still waste. Nothing is 100% efficient. So you tend to have oily stools and sharts. In other words, a lot of diarrhea. You're not eating any proteins or fiber for
Oh,
things to bind to. So diarrhea is really common both during and after a fast.
okay.
There's there's even people now. Granted, I've done a 21-day fast before, but
Mm-hmm.
there's people only did it once. Don't recall any issues, but you will still have bowel movements
Mm,
weeks into a fast, and
mm,
sometimes it surprises people like what's going on. But the main
mm-hmm.
thing is with never trust a fart is yes, you can have some issues, and it's when there's new stuff coming in, it's out with the old. So your body will tends to clear things out as soon as you eat, like within anywhere from immediately to 30 minutes to a couple
Right.
hours. So here's the number one. This is the most important thing refeeding. Be around a bathroom. Seriously, it's the most important thing. Um,
Okay, so no matter what food you eat, it's fine. Just do whatever.
yeah,
Just be near a bathroom.
and yeah, be near
Basically.
a bathroom, never trust a fart, eat whole foods, eat nutritionally dense foods, but yeah, if you want to go vegan or carnivore or anything in between, you want to go keto
Mm,
style because eating keto style more ketogenically can continue some benefits, particularly with improving insulin sensitivity, as that
okay.
will, yeah, reducing the carbs will help keep your insulin low. But that being said, if you don't have insulin resistance, there's really no benefit to that. You're not really going to
Yeah.
get any huge boom to your insulin sensitivity. And like me, I lost all my weight like eating heavy carbs. Like it wouldn't be uncommon for me to have like 2 cans of beans and 4 cups of rice or something, and that's me breaking my fast. Like
Okay.
but I've done everything in between. It's like I'll have heavier meals. I've done buffets. I've done it all. But yeah, I've got 23. It's like don't do this at home, kids. It's 23 years of experience though fasting. So like I know what I'm doing. I know my body, and I'm quite well adapted to it. So I'm a little bit different story. But yeah, in general, you want to take it slow and steady, especially when you're less experienced. See how your body reacts, but also keep in mind that it's going to change. The more that you fast, it can definitely change. So always be cautious, right? Until you've got a lot of experience under your belt.
No, okay. No, that's very interesting. So, yeah. Because I feel like if you ask some people, they're going to be like, oh, you need to break the fast with something that's, I don't
Oh yeah,
know, very healthy or very easy to eat or da da da. But basically, you're telling me, look, as long as you do it properly, you can break your fast with a chocolate bar. Just don't indulge in nasty food the
yeah.
rest of your life, basically.
Yes, I mean, eating pizza or a bar of chocolate isn't doing you any favors,
Mm,
and especially for the inexperienced, there's a chance that you can get a bit of an upset stomach from some things.
that makes sense. Yes.
But yeah, it's not gonna set you back. It's not gonna ruin, that one thing and how you
Mm,
break your fast is not
mm.
going to ruin the results of your fast unless you go, you know, really off the wall.
Yeah, no,
So,
sure.
you know.
Interesting. No, very, very interesting.
Oh,
And yeah, go on.
I was gonna say I got to give a shout out to bone broth. So bone broth is one of the most recommended foods to break a fast with because
Okay.
it is delicious, it is nutritious, it's really easy on the stomach. My problem though with the general recommendation is there's a lot of store brands. Like I make all my bone broth from scratch. Like I cook bone in meat, just about every single week, and I'll always make a broth from it.
Hmm.
So yeah, like I've got 3 quarts of jellified bone broth in my fridge right now, from the last turkey that I made. Um, and but if you're buying store bought, not only can it be very expensive, it
Mm,
can also have a bunch of junk in it, and some of it's
mm,
hard to say from real, right? So I do recommend, like, even though as great as bone broth is, you definitely, like with anything that you eat that's store bought, that's not Whole Foods, you got to read the labels, know what's in it. There's some brands that are much better than others. Um, but make sure that you're eating something that's real, right? And it's not just like a bouillon flavored drink.
no, that makes sense. Very, very interesting. I mean, I guess that makes sense. It's like it's not because you buy something that is healthy that it's necessarily going to be. Just read the label.
No.
But no, fascinating. I've definitely have more questions for you. Yeah, so because from what I've looked up and talked to people about fasting for extended periods, I've heard that it's women tend to get hit harder by it. Like it's more dangerous for women basically to fast. So what do you say? Because you went like this at some point, so I would like to hear what you have to say.
Yeah. So there's plenty of studies that show that first off, women do have a difference obviously because, well,
Mm,
especially if you haven't gone through menopause and you're still having a menstrual cycle, that does make it different, right? That changes some more things in the body. And some women
mhm.
absolutely don't feel comfortable fasting at different phases of their cycle.
That makes sense.
And so it's understandable, right? But the
Mhm.
the clinical research on it clearly shows that it's safe for women to fast during any phase of their cycle.
Mm,
And I actually just responded to this. Someone was asking about it because their period was delayed. It was like
mm,
they were
mm.
4 days late. And I said, okay, not anyone said I'm not pregnant. Okay, cool. Well, and actually, this case, if that person was pregnant, you do not want to fast if you're
No.
pregnant. And it's the same thing with your menstrual cycle. Is that if you are nutritionally depleted in something, right, and that can be your vitamins and minerals and things of the such, or calorically, right? Um, and like one important note, right, is a lot of hormones are derived from saturated fats, right? Especially like estrogen and testosterone. So a lot of nutrients play a role in the building blocks, and so if you're nutritionally depleted, you can impact your cycle. And like and I forget the exact information on this. Wasn't a focal point of my research, but I know like a lot of people who are anorexics will
Hmm.
stop having their fasting or stop having their period completely.
Yeah, no, I
Um,
do, I do know that
yeah,
people like women suffering from eating disorders that don't eat much at all, they do get have, I don't know how it's called, but the period stops. I
yeah.
do know that.
So, so my advice to this person is saying, look, it could just be a one-off, but it's very
Mm,
common for fasting, to impact to potentially impact your menstrual cycle.
mm,
So, look at it cautiously, but the clinical studies show that after you refeed, both male and female, your hormones go back to normal. So,
right.
like for men, for example, like men actually have a pretty significant impact to testosterone while
Mm-hmm.
fasting. It goes
Mm-hmm.
down very quickly. Um, but as soon as you refeed, it goes back up.
No, yeah, that makes
So,
sense.
like there's no long-term damage or harm, but like, will you have some fluctuations? Yes. And of course, with hormones, anytime that you have fluctuating hormones, you do have a potential to impact your menstrual cycle. So, don't be over worried about it. Do take precaution from it. And if it happens again, you should probably look at doing some nutritional loading before you fast again, or if things are bad or it's really delayed or it's been persistent for a long time, go to the doctor and be safe, get yourself checked out.
No, that actually makes a lot of sense what you say, and it's almost like maybe it's more another underlying issue, and because you're
Hmm.
going through a fast, and
Oh,
therefore
yeah.
the hormones are going to change up. It's becoming much more apparent now, that
Yeah.
issue that wouldn't be noticeable otherwise, right?
Exactly. So fasting can exacerbate existing conditions. And
Mm-hmm.
so again, fasting might not be the cause, but as you said, right, 100%, it could be an underlying issue that fasting just kind of exposes. And especially when you talk about nutritional deficiencies, fasting absolutely will expose nutritional deficiencies because you go from getting just enough every day not to have serious problems to then getting nothing, and so, as soon as you fast, you could see some more mild or severe symptoms of nutritional deficiencies. And the problem is nutritional deficiencies are really hard to diagnose and to nail down, even testing, for a lot of other reasons too. So it's just safe. Like the safe practice is, if you see anything persistent or wrong or whatever, be precautious. Do some nutritional loading before you try to fast again. And that's, yeah, women, men, pretty much that's the safe bet for any sort of remedy for what you're experiencing.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, okay, good. I mean, good that there's no big differences between the two of us.
Yeah. But you
um,
find you find
Go
that
on.
out a lot. Yeah, no, no, and this is you find that out a lot too, like especially in weight loss. Like women think that, oh, well they're so much different. It's like, well, no. I mean, granted, there's a big difference in hormones and
Mm-hmm.
men are able to build more muscle than most women. Again, that's in general. Look, there's a lot of women that have more muscle than me,
Yeah, no,
so
definitely. It's just
yeah,
rule of thumb because of our bodies.
yeah. Testosterone just makes it easier, you know.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
ooh, like interesting thing here too. If you have like where your body stores fat
Mm-hmm.
is influenced by hormones and especially hormone imbalances. So like for example, your chest, right? Estrogen causes fat to be stored in your chest as well as, your hips.
Mm.
So that's one of the reasons too why men predominantly will have beer bellies
Mm.
over a pear shape, for example,
Mm.
whereas that's and it's due to those hormones. But you can look at different parts of your body and see if you have any imbalances, a lot, just by like if you have some disproportional fat storage.
Hmm. Very interesting.
Yeah.
I had another question for you. So clearly, you know about fasting. You've done fasting, whether it's more short term or more long term. And I was wondering, how do you think this lifestyle of yours impacts your social life? Whether
Okay. Yeah.
it's whether yeah, whether it's, going out with friends, you get invited somewhere, or even just, I don't know, in your day to day.
Oh yeah, man, in so many ways. And this is, this is something again, it's not really scientific, but it's a huge impact to potentially your fasting success.
Mm.
And man, like it's really rough because first off, because fasting is stigmatized and demonized a lot, people if people talk, oh, this is one of the other rule, or this is one of the other rules of fast club, it's what it's called, right? So so the first rule is don't talk about fast club, right? Of course, second rule, don't talk about fast rule. Third rule, never trust a fart. The rest is just whatever joke you want to make. um but if you mention fasting, like you're going out, you're in social settings and the like so much of our social lives revolve around consuming things, whether or not,
Eating,
it's
drinking.
coffee or going out to lunch or dinner, a cake or donuts or whatever at work, things like
Mm-hmm,
that. And people will see that you're not eating, and they'll notice. They're like, "Oh, hey, why aren't you eating?" And so there's this thing like, don't talk about fast clubs. It's like, oh man, I'm prolonged fasting. I've gone 3 days without food. I'm feeling great. I'm feeling awesome. Oh my God, you're gonna kill yourself. What are you doing? That's so stupid. You know,
mm-hmm.
and yeah, I mean, it is like, oh, yeah, so many comments on Reddit about it too. And here's one of the things too. If you have a lot of success, like fasting is the best method for rapid weight loss. You know,
Mm-hmm.
and an unfortunate part is, you know, if you're having a huge amount of success with your diet and you have someone, because there's a lot of people struggling with their health, struggling with weight, and people see you being that successful that quick, um, it can cause them to kind of, lash out on you, to kind of respond to that, because it's facing they're is effectively looking at their own inability to have that success, right?
All right.
So you can get like there are people that have talked about a whole lot of stories, and it really hurts like when loved ones and other people like are attacking you. Like, oh, you need to eat, you need to, you're killing yourself. Like, oh, this is something, and they're doing
Mm.
that merely because, like one of the it's talked a lot about in like Buddhist, philosophies as well, is that some people will attack the good in you because it makes it just in general, because it makes them confront their own issues and their own struggles.
Well,
And
yeah.
yeah, so you can't, but look, like you don't want to blame people, or you don't want to say, oh, they're toxic and get them out of your lives, because a lot of times this, I mean, it could be kids, it could be spouses, it could be partners, it could be parents, whatever. um and the important thing is, there are a lot of ways, excuse me, there
That's
are a
okay.
lot of ways there are a lot of ways that you can talk about it and bring it up gently, and things like that. And I mean, they're pretty expansive, but like any sort of communication, know your audience. One of the things that is really good to say, for example, is like, look, um, the safety of prolonged fasting is really well established. I thank you for being concerned about my health, but I'm feeling great. I'm having results. I've done my research. This is all really safe. So, it's okay. But yeah, there's a lot of other, if you're not talking about someone who's close with you, like a coworker or random
Mm.
person on the street you're talking to, yeah, it's like usually just, don't bring it up. Oh, yeah, I'm making some diet changes. I'm trying to get healthy. Say things like that to just avoid
Yeah.
going into the depth, of it. But if you want to bring it up and someone talks about it again, bring it up gently and wait. Oh, you know what? I've had a whole lot of success, with prolonged fasting. Like, don't put it on the other person for anything. Like, oh, you've got to try this. And just
No,
like
yeah,
talking
yeah.
about insulin resistance, there are ways that things could be. There are some other approaches that you can be just as successful with and might be better for you. Like a very low energy diet. So yeah, I mean, it's really tough social settings, but I do recommend, you know, like before you're actually fasting, try to abstain. Like, let's say, again, there's an event at work or you're going out to dinner with someone, just get some practice. right? It's a good thing.
Mm,
Before you're actually really fasting, get some practice. So go to a dinner with friends and don't eat and
I
just
don't
drink a
eat.
glass of water, you know?
That's a
And
very
yeah,
good advice. That's
yeah,
very good. I like that.
so you can judge the crowd and you can always say, "Oh, I'm not hungry. I ate earlier," but get used to it. Get some practice.
No, that's very interesting. I feel like, yeah, I like that you said sometimes people just project their insecurities
Yeah.
onto you, because I feel like there is an interesting, there's it's interesting. There's either the side of, your loved ones are generally worried about you and they don't
Hmm.
really understand, but there's also the side of maybe they would love to lose some weight as well, and they see you are and ooh,
Yeah.
and they don't really want to dare to do that. Okay, no, that's very interesting, because I was wondering, because I do I had, when I was doing my little fast, I remember I had to reschedule meeting a friend, because I was like, I can't, I can't do it. I can't be out. I'm sure that friend would have understood and be like, oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
But I was like, I'm not gonna be able to control. My will is not strong enough. I will need to eat, to have a
Yeah.
coffee and eat a cake with this person. Like, I'm gonna be surrounded with them. So yeah, doing a test, going
Hmm.
out and knowing you're not gonna eat, but you're not fasting, so you could if you wanted to. I feel like it's a very
Exactly.
good advice, because yeah, there's less pressure in your
Yeah.
head. Wow, that's crazy. And have you done that then? Have you gone out and not eaten, but not like, how did you prepare yourself?
So, I mean, that's one thing that's a little bit different about my story because, again, like I did it before it was ever a thing, before it was more popularized and talked about
Mm-hmm.
and things like that. Um, and so, in terms of preparing myself, like I was already used to it. Like I naturally ate OMAD. So, most of the time that I was out with people, like I wouldn't eat. Oh, here's the thing, right? So, as an OMAD amateur competitive eater, like let's say I'm at work and lunch is getting catered. Well,
Mm,
my MO, right? Because I look, especially if it's good food, free food is even better.
right,
So,
tastes better.
but here's the thing, I don't, I usually do one meal a day and I like to eat to be full. So normally they're just buying, like, let's say they're buying subs or something like that. So you
Mm.
might have like one, 6-inch sub for you or something like that to eat, right? No, no, that is not a meal. That's a snack. I will devour that in like less than a minute, no. So
Uh,
what I'll do is I'll wait until everybody finishes, and then if they have enough at the end for me to eat and to be full, so yeah, it could be like, oh, they've got 10 6-inch subs left. Great, I'll start eating them.
I have all of them.
Yeah, I'll have 8. Like, okay, cool. Like I've got enough for me to eat. So I was really used to not eating, abstaining, eating differently, and things like that. For a lot of different reasons. So I was very well used to it. I'm also someone who's very comfortable in my own skin, so
Mm.
it doesn't bother me much. Where it's like, look, if someone wants to, shame me for fasting or whatever, it's like, F them. Like, I don't, whatever. Like, you're a troll, you're trying to make me feel bad, whatever, you know. But not exactly that. I mean, that's just kind of jokingly. But as a Buddhist, you have to you love everybody. Where it's like, look, I understand that you might have some problems, but I'm fine. But I don't care. Like, it doesn't bother me personally. Like, I don't get insulted. I don't get offended, because everybody's just living their own life, and
Mm.
that is definitely something that you can't say is right or wrong. However, they're doing it, even if they're being mean and caustic or whatever, it's like, sure,
Yeah, that's
like,
fair.
look, it's their life though.
So you mentioned, if I'm not mistaken, that you are Buddhist.
Yes.
Yes. Could
Well,
you
I should say this.
walk me through this?
Yeah, I follow a lot of Buddhist practices,
Okay.
so in terms of like meditation, but like also, this term is used more for like in Stoics is like equanimity, but it
Right.
goes into Zen Buddhism and the concept of nems and your emotional state. So being at a constant, peaceful, unwavering emotional state, right? And that's one of the reasons why I don't get offended. I'm continually practicing just being at peace. So, but yeah, meditation is great. for health. Like there's a lot of indications that it does have some significant, potentially significant benefits. But yeah, it helps keep you focused and centered and things like that. And those are definitely great practices to have when you're fasting and you're getting hungry, because it's real. Like a lot of people do experience a lot of more cravings and hunger in the first like 72 hours of
Mm,
fasting, and it typically starts to get a bit better. That's another reason for fasting at least 72 hours.
mm.
Um, and it's like someone had put it on Reddit that fasting less than 72 hours is like torturing yourself for a reason. Then right before you're about to get your prize, you give up. It's like that's really when things start getting good. Yeah, yeah.
No, and so I was interested then, do you think there is a link between your fasting and your spirituality in a way? Do you think they
Oh,
complement each
100%.
other? Do you, yeah.
100%. So Um, like it's very well established about the mind-body connection and actually being aware and in tune with yourself, right? Your emotional state and
Mm,
things like that, where things are coming from. It is something that can highly benefit you when you're fasting. So there's this concept of biofeedback. So
mm,
biofeedback is about tuning into your body, listening to your body, and basing your actions to get better results on that biofeedback. And like
mm,
everything's kind of a data point. So how you're feeling emotionally is definitely a valid data point. And the placebo effect and mind over matter, like they're real. There's no stronger drug in the world than a placebo, right? Because 20 to 30% of the time it's going to have some sort of significant impact. And the other part to it as well is if you adopt this mindset that you're of punishment and starvation when
mm,
you're fasting, then
mm.
you're going to be miserable, and it's going to make it very difficult to not only do that, stick to that fast that you're currently in, but it's going to make it very unpleasant as a lifestyle change. So
No,
like one of the mantras, that I have is I'm healing, not hungry, right? This is choice, not punishment,
no,
you
that it's
know.
like
Yeah.
gaslighting yourself, but in a good way.
hmm
No,
And
I like
so
it.
but look, I'll go a little bit further, and I think
Hmm.
things like, this is another thing that I highlight in the book, like visualization, and Arnold Schwarzenegger is, is very he advocates a lot for visualization, and he credits some of his success to like visualizing his biceps as mountains and things like that. So that type of like imagining yourself in a healthy body, like and things like that you can do with fasting, like imagine that physique that you want or that weight loss, doing those positive things. Even though this isn't something you can necessarily scientifically prove, but I do believe that telling your body that these things are going to happen and preparing it can not only make it more pleasant, but it can also be more successful, right?
No, very, yeah, okay. No, I feel like now that you were talking about it, it makes sense that it's a lot part of your success. Like, it's like being an athlete, it's a lot about, practicing your body and going to the gym and running and da da da. But I feel like there's the mental aspect that
Oh
we
yeah.
don't really talk about that's almost more important, we don't know.
Well, actually, I just remembered a study that I should bring up. They've
Mm-hmm.
done some studies on elite athletes
Mm-hmm.
where they will just sit still in a room and visualize doing exercises, and there are studies that have shown that you can still get improvements in strength just through practicing visualization. So those studies are out there, so it is very real.
Whoa. No, fascinating. Okay. Whoa. Maybe I should start visualizing myself being the sexiest woman on the beach and I will become her.
Who says you're not already? F them.
Thank you. No, fair enough. Wow. So I had another little question that would
Mm-hmm.
be more fun. So you do competitive eating. So I
Mm-hmm.
was wondering, what give me a story or two of the craziest things you've done.
Outside of the 4.5 pounds of raw beef a day.
Yeah. I
Okay.
mean, sorry, I was processing.
So
You can
yeah.
talk about the raw beef situation as well, though.
Oh,
Like how
it's
that made you
yeah.
feel, how you know.
So, and again, I did clarify, like amateur competitive eater all the way. Like,
Mm, mm,
I'm back up to kind of my prime, so I could do easily 7 pounds of food in a sitting. Um, Beyond that, might be a little bit rough. But the pros can do 10 to 15 pounds in a sitting, and of course,
okay,
like
sorry, I just
Joey.
had to Google pounds in kilograms because that's how it works. But
Okay, yeah,
it's 7 pounds of food is 3 kilos. But anyway,
yep,
that's just for me. No worries.
you're good. You're good. What like it's yeah 3 point something. Anyway,
Mm,
um, so like Joey Chestnut though, man, he's insane, right? And I just
mhm.
looked up like there's a famous kind of eating competition of sorts in the movie Cool Hand Luke. Now that movie is before my time, but it's like it's the 50 egg challenge. And so I was
I've
just
heard of this film.
yeah. So um I looked it up to see if there were any kind of YouTubers, and competitive eaters that have done that, how quickly. And yeah, I guess Joey Chestnut ate 141 hard-boiled eggs in something like in less than 10 minutes. I forget the exact time. It's nuts. I mean, that guy can, yeah. I mean, anyway, there's a reason why
Anyway.
there's a reason why he's been the renowned champion in the Nathan's hot dog eating contest for so
Mm,
many years,
mm, mm.
and I think in that right, that's a 10-minute time limit. I'm trying to remember. I think he got his best like the last competition, but it's something like 70 or 80 hot dogs, in less than 10 minutes. Like that guy is the goat by all means. Um,
But yeah, what about your experiences though?
yeah.
What would you say is the craziest thing you've done to your body and how did you handle it?
Oh, okay. So the craziest thing that I've done to my body,
Yeah.
um, isn't isn't exactly fasting, and it
Okay.
isn't exactly competitive eating.
Okay.
I went without water or any liquid for a week,
No water for a week or any other no other
and I
water
was
source like H2O sources. None of
yep,
that.
no water, no coffee, no tea, no energy drinks, no liquids, and I wanted to test
Wow.
out the theory if my body could get enough water from
For food.
food, right? Because when you're
Okay.
eating like most fruits and vegetables are something like 90% plus water, right?
Cool.
And one of the main purposes of your large intestine is to reabsorb the water from your digested food.
Mm.
So I wanted to see if I could do that. So I was eating bananas, and I did a week eating. So I think I was still sticking around the 5.2 pounds of bananas, which is roughly like 25 to 30 bananas in a day.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Um, and yeah, I did an entire week. That included like a 1.5 mile run in 103-degree weather. So I was like just sweating balls at the end of it. And yeah, I was
So
fine,
sorry,
like
so
no issues.
you were just eating bananas for the whole week.
Yep,
Nothing else.
nothing else. Again, that was again no liquids, no external
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
water, no yeah, just
But you
bananas.
were is it because you could have just been eating lots of like watermelon and it's loads of water. You know what I mean? That's what I'm
Yeah,
asking. Like,
exactly. I mean, it
okay,
could have been any fruit or vegetable that is more easily digested with a high water content. It really could have been anything. But I
okay.
feel really good eating bananas. It's worked for me, so I decided to stick with the banana diet for that particular experiment.
No, okay. And so how did that make you feel? Like, did you feel any dizziness? Did you feel like at some point you were gonna pass out? No.
I felt fine. Yeah, nothing. Oh, and this is also weird with my fasting experiences too. And I touched on this, but of course, there's just so many things that are related to all of this, like in so many stories. Like, I mean, we can skip back to this too, but like in terms of my Buddhist practices, like I lived
Mm.
the nomad lifestyle for 10 months of the last year, like living in campgrounds in the woods and nature and things like
Right.
that.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, yeah, I've got a few stories in my belt. Um,
Would
but
you
let's
care
see.
to share some interesting ones?
Oh, sure. I mean, we'll do that here. I'm trying to focus here again on the man. Yeah, I did. Oh, well, I'm glad it was an hour and a half, and this is the first time I really lost my train of thought. But yeah, like one of the most interesting things, like you brought this up as well. is exercise. And there's a
Mm.
lot of clinical studies that exercise is really not as significant or impactful as most people think they are. There's a lot of people, and when I say like when people exercise just because, they
For
want
the sake
to,
of
they're
it.
just doing it, yeah, for the sake of it, for, oh, well, if I don't exercise, I'm going to be unhealthy, right? That
Mm-hmm.
mentality. Not,
Mm.
oh, hey, well, I'm going to train for this, or I'm going to do CrossFit because I want to, do some, have some fun, or, really embrace it. Or, hey, I'm going to be bulking, so I'm going to be really focused on high quality diet and my protein intake and all that kind of stuff, right? But people that are just like, well, I have to exercise just because.
Mm.
And people typically implement that in like, like around 3 sessions a week for about 30 minutes, right? So they'll do a treadmill, they'll do some machines, and then they go home.
Mm.
The problem is there are studies that have been shown that that really doesn't cause any significant health changes. It goes back to moderation really doesn't work for people that have, especially for people that have existing health conditions.
Right.
And you can even look at like gyms weren't even a thing until like really the 1970s, 1980s, And of course, the obesity epidemic really started in America around 1970. But yeah, before that, like, I mean, it was Muscle Beach and a few select, bodybuilders and people, Jack LaLanne, gotta love Jack LaLanne. Um,
Okay.
so like when I was out at the campground, a lot of people were doing it. There were a lot of people doing it for vacation or were very well off. They had big rigs like Class A's and stuff like that, and they were eating and drinking quite liberally. But you had a lot of people doing it out of financial necessity. So yeah, the nomad lifestyle really took off. Like even if you don't have to, it's a very fiscal conservative like approach to life. Um, so you find people that aren't eating a whole lot that are
Mm.
moving around a whole lot. It's campground and things like that. And you would suspect that the population and demographics in the campground would be more physically fit, and it's just not the
Mm-hmm.
case. So it's like
Mm.
if you're just doing a moderate diet, if you're just doing moderate exercise, there's a lot of observational evidence too outside of how we were prior to 1970 and how we are after now. But there again, there's clinical studies that support it too, and it was really surprising um, to see that you know there were still people struggling with obesity despite their increased activity and their decreased caloric intake compared to a lot of people.
And so, what do you? So, obviously, the answer to that is in part fasting. But
Yeah.
what would you say is another answer to that?
Um, so from a clinical standpoint and a physiological standpoint, it's really severe caloric, like any form of severe caloric deprivation with high nutritional diet or refeeding. I mean, that's really the answer. Like so much of it is related to our nutritional levels, like our proper metabolic function is very nutrient intensive. And when you have lower amounts of nutrients, right, it's not calories. The world is hyper focused on calories. That's not the big deal.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so, focusing on nutritional density and doing some form of severe caloric deprivation. Oh, yeah, there's another thing I didn't mention yet called like fasting mimicking diets, always known as FMDs. One of the most prominent is a method called Bushinger fasting. But like you could do your juice fast or your bone broth fast or things like that. The one issue with those long term, though, is you're not getting complete nutrition. So you do need to take breaks, right? So it is
Mm.
important
Oh.
to do nutritional loading prior to any severe caloric deprivation. Now, granted, look, there's people that eat fast food for the majority of their diet every day and have done that for years, right? They're still alive. They don't have severe nutritional deficiencies. And studies on that show it's a very, very small percentage of the population that has a really severe nutritional deficiency. And I mean, and that's something too where that you're risking your life when you have a severe nutritional deficiency and you're going to be feeling it, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't mean that everybody has an optimal level of nutrition. And I think that's one of the reasons why people can, well, that is a reason, one of the reasons why people can struggle with weight loss, even in a severe caloric deprivation. Because again, nutrients are essential to fat mobilization and energy metabolism in general. So the solution is eat better food, right? I mean, that really is the best thing that you can do for you. You know, eat better food, get nutritionally loaded, you're going to feel better. And just like insulin resistance, right? If you've had a really poor quality diet, you kind of want to correct that issue first. And especially if you haven't been able to build a healthy relationship with food and you
Mm-hmm.
haven't been eating healthy and clean, here's the thing, that's critical to fasting. And that's one of the reasons too why I love fasting, the fasting community, because everything's important, right? So people are
Mm.
on, yeah, on everything from vegan to carnivore. People are doing intermittent fasting and OMAD, on their eating days. Um, People are doing all sorts of other, like IF windows and other strategies. So you get everything. So you're talking about every single form of diet, every single sort of routine and regiment and things like that. I mean, it just has everything in it in terms of what is physiologically relevant in the realm of diet and nutrition sciences. So yeah, but the number one thing that I recommend for anyone, right, is start focusing on healthy clean eating. And there's a general concept called, like, 90-10 or the 90% rule or something like that, which is your goal is to eat 90% of your meals clean and healthy, right?
Oh, right. Okay. Got
Yeah.
you.
So like even that, like, right? So it's great and it's fine to have splurges like that, but a lot of people, they often, if you're not tracking it, they often don't recognize how much they're indulging.
No,
So
that's
just
fair.
yeah.
So, like,
So
the 90-10 means that the 10% is you can have like a chocolate bar and some crisps or chips,
whatever,
but the rest
whatever it is.
90% focus
Yeah.
on plant and meats and good stuff.
Yeah. But it really is just sticking to a diet and sticking to a regiment, because that particular mentality doesn't really have any sort of rigid implementation. It's all about just, hey, what's your plan and stick to it, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
and that's one of the reasons too why I love fasting and a lot of these methods. There are so many ways to be healthy, right? And a lot of these communities, like, they're really tribal, and they'll disparage and other people, like, oh man, like, dude, the keto community, as I call it, the keto cult, they can be really off the rails, man. Oh, carbs are awful and things like that. It's like, look, there is a lot of clinical evidence to support that fruit is very healthy and nutritious for you. Of course, when you go to the carnivore side to it, they don't think they really kind of demonize plants in general because of all the things that have negative health benefits from plants. And I forget all the, specific chemical compounds in there.
Mm.
Um, but they say, oh, no, 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 they're bad for you. That's, causing inflammation and everything like that. But the fact of the matter is, as long as you're eating whole foods, like, that's the real big thing, whole foods, hopefully
Right.
nutrient dense, right? Then you're gonna be okay. And that's really, so you can apply those two principles, right? The 90-10 rule and nutritional density, um, and you will do wonders for your health if you're having any sort of chronic symptoms or health conditions or things like that.
No, that's. I feel like
So,
I like your approach because you're kind of like, you know, the people who just want X or the people who just want Y. They're both wrong. It's just have both. Just don't be silly when you're doing it. Just
yeah,
have. Yeah, that's
my
it.
my mindset is everything's a tool,
Mm.
and like I was talking about, when you're getting calcium though, like, this is the real, like, when people are disparaging towards other diet implementations. And the fact is too, you can take any sort of diet and do it horribly wrong. I've known vegans that just eat the chemical soup and that's it. They, like,
Pickles.
I mean, this is true too. Like, I tend to eat more fruits and vegetables than most vegans, so um
No, that's fair.
but then again too, it's like, yeah, I also eat a lot more meat than most people too. I'm just, I'm not eating a lot of the fillers, the breads and the grains that a lot of people like have in their diet. So anyway, even though I do love rice, I mean, rice and beans is the go-to salad meal. A little bit of Tabasco in there, you're set, man. And I've got, yeah, no, it's not uncommon for me to get like 150 grams of fiber in a day, but I
I feel
will.
like you have a capacity to eat a lot, though, from what I gather.
Yeah. My
Yeah.
average my average meal is probably around 4 pounds of food. It's probably my average meal.
Wait, sorry, I'm just
So,
gonna have to do the
oh yeah,
whole.
2 kilos.
No,
Like
I'm
my
doing
average.
it. 1.8 kilos. Yeah,
Yeah,
you know the conversions. That's good. Right. I'm
yeah.
afraid to say we're nearing the end of my free 2 hours of recording with this website. So I'm gonna ask you one last question. Actually,
Okay.
two questions.
Oh man, you should have given yourself more than 15 minutes. I mean, we'll see. Whew, I'll try to be brief.
No.
Okay.
First question. What would you say is your favorite meal? Or one
Oh
of your favorite meals
man.
if it's too hard.
Oh no, no, no. I got this one down. Yeah,
Okay.
I'm a big food chili, all the way. Chili.
Chili.
Oh yeah.
Like
No, I
any
I
chili?
make well, so I'm a big foodie and cook, and I make competition level chili. I do make some different varieties, as well.
Okay.
Um, So chili. I mean, chili's probably like if I had to pick one thing to eat, and I was like, this is a funny kind of topic too. I started thinking about it. Chili is such an amazing food. It is not only can it be a meal, right? It's also a topping. It could be a
Yeah.
condiment. It could be kind of eaten as a soup. Like it literally fits every single facet of food that you can think of. It can be everything. Um,
I like
there's
it.
there there's probably something else out there that like fits, you know. But yeah, chili. Like my other big go-to is barbecue. But it's like, oh
Okay.
my gosh, like oh, I love doing turkey. Oh man, see, I'll have to share this one time. I've got a recipe for turkey. Now, I eat so much turkey, or rather I cook so much turkey because I for many years to including right now, like when I can, like when I'm this is harder to do on the nomadic journey, but um, I'll cook usually a couple whole chickens or a turkey every single week in part for dog food because it's
Oh, okay.
cheaper. You can buy like look, you can get a turkey for, as little or less, especially when it's in season for 99 cents a pound. Okay. Then you can make this delicious bone broth. Now, bone broth, if you're buying it
Mm-mm.
at the store, it's super expensive as well, and it's not even as good nutritionally. Um,
Mm-mm.
so yeah, so I'll make some sort of bone-in meat and I'll make a broth like every single week. And yeah, just absolutely love that as well. Can go to town. Oh yeah, but I came up with a recipe or the method of cooking it where I can take it from defrosted to fully cooked in less than an hour.
Wow. I feel
And
like
it's
after
delicious.
this
It's
talk, I'll
perfect.
email you for your chili
Yeah.
recipes and the bone
Uh,
broth and all of that.
there you go. There you go.
Okay, and
Please do.
last question. I know you've already shared a lot about tips and tricks, but what would be the one last advice you would give to someone who would want to get into fasting but has never done it before? Like, what would you say is one thing they should just focus on?
All right. I know it's good. I mean, my biggest piece of advice for anyone to take is believing in yourself. You know, you are not broke. It
Oh,
is not your fault. You are not broken. Like you have to believe in yourself, you have to do it, right? And it's like the world is stacked against us. Our society, our cultures, our habits, they all revolve around being a consumer, particularly of food,
mhm,
and like I said, like in the social aspects, people that have had successes, they don't get support. Oh yeah, this is a fun fact here. Did you know that Weight Watchers is one of the most successful diet programs, like
no.
as a whole long term? Yeah, it's crazy. But one of the things is they're big on support groups because even
Oh.
though they're really based on moderation and they're not doing a lot that's really causing, quick or even real substantial physiological changes,
Mm, mm.
you know, but they have a support group. So the
Right.
changes that people make, the lifestyles and mentality, like it's huge. That's a huge part of
Very
of being
interesting.
successful. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And people will. Like there's like a one of the Reddit sites where people just, not particularly dedicated, to like fasting or keto or anything, just are weight loss, and there's so many people struggling there. And you get these responses all the time. It's your fault. You need to put down the fork. You're doing crap and things like that. And look, let me say this, like even if that were the case, which again, I can clinically show you that it's not, that there's much more to it, like hormonally, metabolically. Um, oh yeah, and the fact that our entire food industry is built around people consuming more. Our food has been engineered to be addictive, right? And we don't even call it food addiction. We have a fun name for it. It's called food noise. No, no, no. You're an addict. You're a food addict. But oh no, but it's a lot easier going back to admitting things and coming to terms with things, right? It's a lot easier to call it food noise than to say, you know what, I'm a food addict. If I can't go without a dessert, once a day or even one or even in a week, if I can't do like no desserts for a week, well, yeah,
I
you've
agree.
got some food addiction problems.
Mm-hmm.
And so when people come on that, but again, it's not their fault, right? They're not even to blame. It's like the entire food industry has instigated and perpetuated that and tried to expand it as much as possible because that's what gives them profits, and that's the business of the food industry.
No,
The food
I
industries,
agree.
yeah. And so it really hurts. It really hurts when you have people advocating for things that are known to be in clinical studies to be insufficient for real change. And people do that. Like, so people say, oh, well, just, reduce your calories by, 200 calories and you're going to lose weight. And then, well, the thing is, again, there's BMR downregulation versus the hormone leptin, which easily accounts for 200 calories. You're
Mm.
going to lose a little bit of water weight and you're going to stop. And people say, well, what's wrong with me? And then, oh, no, you must be wrong. You must be lying. You must be doing something bad. Like, because if you were doing, and it's like people struggle with it and it affects their livelihood, their quality of life, their health, and
Yeah.
it just hurts. It just hurts to see that. So the one thing that I have to say is, believe in yourself. You can do it. Um, and I do encourage everybody as well, like the kind of uh, outside of that, my next piece of advice or like a close runner up is read the studies yourself, right?
Mm. Mm.
Even the doctors who are influencers, are oversimplifying things, water things down, or just putting pure clickbait out there. So read the studies for yourself. You know, that'd be
No,
my runner up there.
thank you very much, Brian. I think I will want to chat to you again and again.
Wonderful. Sure. Yeah.
I
No.
hope you
Yeah.
enjoyed it.
Thank you very much for having me, Josie. Appreciate it. Pleasure to talk and to meet you. And yeah, anytime you let me know.
Good.